Rafah is a city at the southern edge of the Gaza Strip, right next to Egypt. It sits at a crossroads of history, geography, and conflict, making it one of the most significant places in the region today. Its location makes it unique. It hosts the only major border crossing between Gaza and Egypt, a vital lifeline for people and aid. This crossing is often the only way in or out for residents, and it's crucial for the delivery of humanitarian supplies. When conflict intensified elsewhere in Gaza, hundreds of thousands fled south, turning Rafah into a crowded sanctuary. Families arrived with little more than what they could carry, seeking safety from the violence further north. Tents and makeshift shelters filled every open space, and the city's population swelled dramatically. Streets, schools, and even empty lots became home to those with nowhere else to go. But now, Rafah is at the center of the conflict. What was once a place of refuge is now under threat. The Israeli military has expanded operations in and around the city, bringing violence to the very place people sought safety. The sounds of war echo through the streets, and fear has replaced hope for many. Over 1 million displaced people are now caught in the crossfire, their hopes for refuge shattered. Families are separated, and daily life is a struggle for survival. What happens in Rafah affects everything: civilian lives, aid delivery, and peace negotiations. Every decision here has ripple effects across Gaza and beyond. Rafah is now a humanitarian crisis zone, a strategic military objective, and a focal point for diplomatic talks. The world's attention is fixed on what unfolds here. The city's fate could shape the future of the entire region. Its strategic position means that any change here could alter the course of the conflict. Its story is the story of the conflict at this very moment. Rafah stands as a symbol of both the suffering and the resilience of Gaza's people. Understanding Rafah means understanding the stakes for everyone involved. It's about the lives of ordinary people, the hopes for peace, and the challenges of delivering aid. The world is watching because what happens here could tip the balance toward more suffering, or toward a breakthrough. Every headline, every negotiation, and every convoy is tied to Rafah's fate. Rafah is more than a city. It's the heart of the crisis. Its streets tell the story of loss, hope, and the urgent need for solutions. That's why its story matters now more than ever. The choices made here will shape countless lives. The choices made here will echo far beyond its borders, influencing the future of Gaza, the region, and the world's response to crisis. Rafah was meant to be a safe zone, a last refuge for families fleeing violence in Gaza. For many, it represented the last hope for shelter, a place where they could escape the relentless conflict and find some measure of security, even if only temporary. Over 1 million people crowded into its streets, relying on aid and hoping for peace. The city quickly became overwhelmed, with makeshift tents and shelters springing up wherever there was space. Every corner of Rafah echoed with the sounds of families trying to rebuild their lives amid uncertainty. Its border crossing with Egypt made it a hub for both humanitarian relief and diplomatic negotiations. The crossing was a lifeline, allowing limited supplies and aid to reach those in desperate need, and serving as a critical point for international dialogue. Talks about ceasefires and aid often centered on Rafah, with hopes pinned on opening the crossing for supplies and evacuations. Each negotiation brought a glimmer of hope that more help would arrive, or that families could be safely evacuated. But recent Israeli military operations have turned Rafah from a sanctuary into another front line. The city, once a symbol of refuge, now faces the same dangers as the rest of Gaza. Areas once considered safe are now under threat, forcing families to choose between staying in danger or moving yet again. Many have already been displaced multiple times, and the trauma of constant upheaval weighs heavily on everyone, especially children. The sense of safety has vanished, replaced by fear and uncertainty. Nights are filled with anxiety, as families wonder if they will have to flee once more. This shift has also complicated peace talks, as military action on the ground changes the dynamics at the negotiating table. Diplomats now face even greater challenges, with every new development in Rafah affecting the prospects for a ceasefire. Rafah is now both a humanitarian disaster and a battleground, making diplomacy even harder. The needs of civilians are urgent, but the violence makes delivering aid and negotiating peace more complex than ever. The city's dual role, as a shelter and a war zone, shows just how fragile hope can be in this conflict. The contrast between moments of calm and sudden violence is stark, reminding everyone how quickly circumstances can change. For displaced families, every day is a struggle to survive and a test of endurance. They wait in long lines for food and water, clinging to hope despite the hardships. Rafah's fate is tied to the fate of peace itself. What happens here will shape the future for thousands, and perhaps for the entire region. The world's attention is focused here because so much hangs in the balance. Rafah stands as a symbol of both the suffering and the resilience of Gaza's people, and its story is far from over. Rafah's landscape has been transformed by war. Once a bustling city, its streets and neighborhoods now bear the scars of relentless conflict, with entire blocks reduced to rubble and open spaces turned into no man's land. Israeli troops have pushed into central neighborhoods, redrawing boundaries with tanks and bulldozers. The city's familiar layout is now unrecognizable, as armored vehicles carve new paths through what were once residential areas. New military corridors now cut through the city, dividing Rafah from the rest of Gaza and splitting the territory in two. These corridors are not just lines on a map, they are physical barriers that reshape daily life. These corridors restrict movement, isolating communities and making aid delivery nearly impossible. Families are separated, and neighborhoods that once relied on each other are now cut off. Roads once used for daily life are now blocked. Open spaces are off limits. The city's infrastructure is fractured, and daily routines have been upended. The border with Egypt is now a militarized zone, heavily guarded and nearly impossible to cross for civilians seeking safety or aid. Every new line on the map shrinks the space available for civilians. Safe zones are disappearing, forcing more people into ever smaller, overcrowded areas. The constant redrawing of boundaries creates chaos and fear. No one knows which area will be safe tomorrow. Families live in a state of uncertainty, always ready to move at a moment's notice. These changes are meant to control the area and restrict Hamas, but they come at a huge cost to ordinary people. The human toll is visible everywhere, in destroyed homes, in the faces of the displaced, and in the loss of community. Rafah has gone from a place of refuge to a maze of barriers and danger. For many, the city now feels like a trap, with few options for escape or relief. The shrinking world here is a stark symbol of the conflict's toll, a daily reminder of how war can reshape not just the land, but the lives of everyone who calls it home. Israel's expanded operations in Rafah serve several goals. First, to pressure Hamas in ceasefire and hostage negotiations by showing military strength. Second, to dismantle what Israel calls Hamas's last stronghold, destroying tunnels, command centers, and weapons caches. Third, to rescue hostages still held by Hamas, a deeply emotional issue in Israel. Finally, to secure the border with Egypt and cut off smuggling routes used by Hamas. These actions are about more than Rafah. They're part of a broader strategy to reshape security in the region. Every move is calculated to gain leverage in talks and achieve military objectives. But these strategies also deepen the crisis for civilians trapped in the city. The battle for Rafah is about territory, security, and the fate of hostages, but it's also about the lives caught in between. The outcome here could redefine the conflict's next phase. The Rafah border crossing is Gaza's main link to the outside world. It's been the gateway for students, patients, families, and, most crucially, humanitarian aid. When Israeli forces took control of the Gazan side, the crossing's future became a political flashpoint. Egypt and aid groups now struggle to operate under new conditions, and the flow of supplies has nearly stopped. The closure of Rafah is a central issue in ceasefire talks. Reopening it is vital for aid, but Israel insists on security control. The standoff has left Gaza more isolated than ever, with food, medicine, and fuel in critically short supply. The crossing is now a symbol of both hope and deadlock. Its fate is a bargaining chip in negotiations, holding the lives of millions in the balance. The battle for this small strip of land is a battle for survival. Rafah's closed gate is a stark reminder of the crisis facing Gaza. For families in Rafah, daily life is a struggle for survival. Nowhere feels safe. Many have been displaced multiple times, forced to abandon what little they have. Children are growing up surrounded by fear, hunger, and trauma. Clean water is scarce. Families walk for hours for a small, often unsafe supply. Food is hard to find. Markets are empty, and prices are out of reach. Malnutrition and disease are spreading, especially among children and the elderly. Hospitals are overwhelmed, lacking basic supplies and staff. Despite everything, families try to create moments of normalcy, sharing what little they have, supporting each other. The constant stress and uncertainty are tearing at the fabric of society. The suffering here isn't just about casualties, it's about the daily, grinding hardship of over 1 million people. Rafah's crisis is measured in lost homes, lost futures, and the relentless fight to survive. This is the human cost of the conflict. Gaza's humanitarian crisis has reached catastrophic levels. Famine has been officially declared. Hundreds have died from malnutrition, many of them children. The expansion of fighting in Rafah has made aid deliveries nearly impossible. The closure of crossings and active conflict block supplies from reaching those in need. Hospitals are collapsing, doctors forced to work without basic equipment or medicine. Diseases like cholera and dysentery are spreading rapidly due to lack of clean water. Every day people die not just from violence, but from preventable causes. The international community calls for more aid, but as long as fighting continues, the crisis deepens. Rafah's suffering is a stark reminder of the human consequences of war. The world must not look away from this unfolding catastrophe. This week, military action and diplomacy are colliding in Rafah. Israeli advances are meant to influence ceasefire talks, but they also risk derailing them. Control of border crossings, especially Rafah, is at the heart of negotiations. Israel's presence on the ground is a bargaining chip, but it complicates finding a neutral solution. The outcome of these talks will determine whether aid can flow and whether the violence will end. For civilians, the stakes are life and death. Famine and disease worsen by the hour. A breakthrough could save thousands. A collapse could mean more suffering. The world is watching as decisions made now will shape the conflict's future. Rafah stands at the crossroads of war and peace. Rafah's story is about people, families searching for safety, children losing their childhoods, the sick and elderly left behind. The shifting lines on the map hide the reality of massive human suffering. Watching Rafah is not just about geopolitics, it's about bearing witness to the cost of conflict. The crisis here is a test of the world's conscience and commitment to humanitarian values. The choices made now could bring relief or deepen catastrophe. Staying informed means understanding the stakes and demanding action for peace and aid. The world's attention can help push for a ceasefire and open lifelines for those trapped. We must listen to the stories from Rafah and remember the real people behind the headlines. The fate of over 1 million civilians is being decided right now. Caring about Rafah is caring about our shared humanity.